Alright guys, it's Thursday and this is the last video, the last day we're going to look at the shadow over Innsmouth. Last time I read a little bit of chapter 5. I'm going to do a little bit more, and this video is going to kind of be our final thoughts and our wrap up, because when I was looking at some of the previous assignments of you answering questions and so on, I could tell a lot of people kind of got what was happening, but maybe missed one aspect of what it meant or why it was happening, or even just stuff like what the narrator was focusing on, things like that. So let me open up or make it full screen here. And we read around here. The stuff I talked about last time is how H.P. Lovecraft in real life had concerns about mental health. His father had died, and probably he knew the real reason, although he said it was some vague terms like exhaustion and so on. The real reason was that he had syphilis, and syphilis not only causes physical issues, but it causes mental problems in a lot of people who've had it for a long time. And Lovecraft was the kind of guy who, he almost felt like there was a curse on him, like there was a curse on his family. Like he loved genealogy and hereditary investigations, and sometimes it took him into terrible areas, but he was also sort of like, looking into that because he had this fear of like, oh, what if there's some, evil thing in my blood, and evil that I can't escape. One of the sciences we talked about early in the story was radiation, of how radiation at the time was this new idea that was changing the world, because you find these strange items that have been there all along, and they're emitting this weird force that we couldn't detect. And you could use it for great things like curing cancer, but you could also, destroy yourself like Marie Curie did from just being next to it. Another science that really captured everybody's attention at the time, and also led to great ideas and bad ideas, was evolution. And so Lovecraft was really fascinated with this idea of evolution, about how, what kind of strange creatures existed in the past, and, did they leave their mark on us in some way? Do we have the heritage of some strange things that no longer exist? And in this story, it's literally true. Like, yeah, we're related to these monsters. And that's how you do it in sci-fi or fantasy. You take an idea and you say, what if it was, instead of just metaphorical monsters, what if they were real monsters? Or instead of, vague fears, what if it was like a real deadly thing right in front of you? So in this story, our guy has escaped from these creatures. He's escaped from this town, but he learns that maybe he's related to these marshes. Maybe he's related to these people. And if you remember way early on, you probably don't remember, but there was a mention that Obed Marsh, the patriarch of the town, the guy who's brought the strange gods from this other island, made a deal with them, got the good stuff, the gold and the prosperity, but he also had to offer sacrifices and had to join in their family and their cult and their civilization. And they said he had another wife, and he had another wife that no one ever saw, and was probably one of these strange deep ones, they call them. But he had a human wife too, and this human wife was someone who had been sent off to Europe and came back and had this strange jewelry and at first people said, oh well, maybe it's this weird European stuff. We're not really used to that around here. But now, after seeing what's going on, we assume that this jewelry was related to the tiara that our narrator saw in chapter 1, this sort of alien thing. I use the word alien. I don't mean it's from another planet. It's just different. It's just weird. And we see this is not human. It's related to these deep ones, these creatures who are totally from Earth. You know, they're not Martians, but they're just on another branch of the path of life. Now, our narrator sees this, and I'm not going to read the whole thing because I don't want to bore you, but not that it's boring, but me reading it might be boring. Our narrator is in this moment where we really see what he's made of. Okay, so I tell this to I have another class of creative writing. And in creative writing, I always say, you got your character, that's not a story. They have a problem, that's not a story. It's not a story until the final part, which is where they react to the problem and they make a decision and they have to go out of their comfort zone and do something, make a commitment. It might be tragic and they kill someone. It might be heroic and they win the championship. It could be anything, but it's not really a story until they have a character and then they encounter problems and then they make a choice. And so right here at the very end, our character makes a choice. And after seeing the jewelry and looking at the family records and then even just looking in the mirror, and he kind of says, wait a minute, I have these strange eyes and I have this strange look, and maybe I'm gonna keep transforming and turn into one of these things. And our narrator has to make this choice of, wait a minute, am I communicating? Do I feel a vision being sent by the gods, or am I just crazy? Should I go to the asylum like my cousin did? Should I kill myself? He thinks for a minute about, getting a gun. I don't know if he had a gun or what. And there's another Lovecraft story, by the way, where the character does kill himself after realizing a monstrous connection. But in this one, our guy says, no, I'm going to join the deep ones. I'm going to get my cousin out of the asylum and we're going to go hop in the ocean, swim down, and live forever with our cousins from another branch. Does this really happen? Is the narrator going crazy? Maybe he's going to jump in the water and drown 5 minutes later. Maybe he's going to get caught trying to break his cousin out. Or maybe he really is going to swim down there and join these ancient gods. And maybe they really are sending the visions to him and giving him good info. We don't know. Again, it's very, very much like an Edgar Allan Poe narrator. Like the guy in Telltale Heart who's like, no, it's an evil eye. Of course I had to kill the man to save myself from the evil eye. Was it really evil eye, or was it just a psychological problem? But this is where we get to see, sort of what it's made of and what it's all about. Our narrator, it's almost like we don't know him until this moment. Before then, he's just a guy who goes to a place. And by the way, I told you how Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde is the inspiration for any kind of story about a scientist who, drinks a potion and turns into something. Any kind of scientist who, through experimentation, has another form. So the Incredible Hulk, which is one of our biggest characters now in our biggest movies, that's just based on Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Or The Fly, a movie I love that's been remade a few times. Or, basically any supervillain at this point, like Dr. Octopus or something, is the sort of scientist who's experimenting, and maybe they have a good idea, but they end up transforming into something evil. And all of that stuff comes from this one, spark of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And in my view, this story is a spark of another kind, which is the sort of, the people who visit some backwoods place, the Wrong Turn, or the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, any of those type of stories where, a city boy goes to a new place and the people there, maybe they're a little bit rural. Maybe they always have some connection with animals. In Texas Chainsaw Massacre, it's all about cows. And in this, it's all about fish. And there's a great Clive Barker short story about this area that worships the giant pig. It's sort of all of those stories about a person who goes to this strange rural place and gets sucked into their strange animalistic rituals are basically inspired by what we're reading right here, The Shadow over Innsmouth. So it's important to think about where they come from and how they're different. They usually have different endings. They usually have either the narrator just die or triumph and run away. But they usually don't have this type, the sort of Edgar Allan Poe type, where the narrator goes crazy, dives in, and joins the monsters, which is a pretty cool ending, especially for something so old. You would expect that in the 90s maybe. But it's interesting here. So anyway, I wanted to go over some of those ideas because they really help frame this whole thing. Instead of just thinking of it as a story like, oh, this happened, and this guy ran away, and then the monsters died. You want to think of it more like, how does it fit into the tradition, and what came before and what came after, and why is it interesting, and why do we care? Okay? Maybe not. Maybe you just want to answer the questions about what happened. And if that's the case, today I'm going to post a quiz. And this quiz has 25 questions over the story, and they pretty much go in order. And they pretty much follow that study guide flashcard thing I showed you. And if you want to do that right now, that's great. If you're not quite ready, you need to read the story. You need to check out that audio book. You need to check out previous assignments. Totally fine. Do this anytime, today or tomorrow. And this will be a take-home / open book quiz. It'll be our first assessment grade. And I think it's going to be a good one because you guys have plenty of time and you can ask questions, whatever you got to do. Thanks.